I'd say it's definitely a different role. Also, just a whole different experience. I've never been in the Marvel world before, never done any kind of this green screen special effects, never had to deal with the secrecy that exists in the Marvel world. So Ant-Man was definitely a new experience. I used to remember the Marvel comics, Hulk, and I remember them, and they were probably because the reason I read comics was just the pictures, and the Marvel comics were incredibly intense in terms of the storytelling and the details and the plotting and this and that. Having taken on this role early on, when I accepted, I was sent, you know, hardcover books of Marvel Comics, beautiful presentations of all of Stan Lee's work, and since then have become a tremendous fan. I used it a lot for research. It was very helpful. Kind of solidified me understanding his background, what kind of scientist he was, Dr. Pym was, the incredible research that he did, and this incredible serum that he developed that allowed a human being to reduce to the size of an ant with human strengths and then right back up to full size again. Well, Hank Pym, first of all, he has a sense of humor. He's got a slight tongue in cheek. He likes to, test people a little bit, put them on. Quizzical mind. Obviously, a brilliant scientist, but combined with his brilliant scientist, he has sort of like a Delta Force military training and weaponry. And so combined, and then of course his confidentiality of being the Ant Man in the originals. He's fantastic. I mean, I used to get a little jealous because my role as Hank Pym is sort of to maintain the plot, to carry the storyline, to do the explanations, the scientific explanations, and all of this, and required a lot of dialogue pertaining to facts and figures. And Paul always got just to react, and then he would have a little button on the end of the scene, which was always funny. A lot of times he improvised and would make them up himself. But I think his whole transition as the Ant-Man, as a father, is beautifully done. Evangeline now is working for my old company, Pym, and she's a very smart engineer, scientist, trained in the martial arts. Sort of like, I guess, as a father, I didn't have a son, but she was my daughter, and I loved her, but she's as close to my son as I could make her. So she's very physical orientated with action and knows how to do it really well, and Evangeline does too. Corey is a fabulous actor. I mean, he really is, and he plays a great villain, and he's very intimidating, and he's tough to act with because he's really big, and he likes to come up really close to you, so you feel really small as you're looking at him. So I had to maintain all of my core Hank Pym ability, not to be just blown over by how good Corey was.
Darren Cross was Hank Pym's mentee. Uh, Pym found him at a very young age, the youngest ever graduate at MIT, and took him under his wing. And as Darren spent time at Pym Tech, he got a whiff of this other life that Hank Pym had as Ant Man, and this incredible technology to be able to shrink to half an inch tall. and he became enthralled with it and obsessed with it and wanted to pursue it. And Hank had decided to leave all that behind, and he realized what a Pandora's box the technology was. So he shut him out, and Hank is not the warmest father figure possible, and really broke Darren's heart. And Darren took over the company and is now the CEO and is full steam ahead trying to pursue that technology. He has this idea that he needs to be this salesman and this larger than life figure. And so he goes at it, but he keeps falling short. So it's a really fun character to play because you have that opposition of the very scared little boy inside and the very boastful industrial captain. He's so great and he's so real and present, which is a really great thing for the cat, because my character is very broad and coming from a big place. And every time I have a scene with him, it just gets very, very real, very quick. He's really an incredible scene partner. Darren and Hope worked together at Pimtech, and both have a similar relationship to Hank, even though Hank is obviously Hope's real father, but he's still a very judgmental and difficult father, and they share that, and they share that resentment and yet at the same time that desire to try to impress this father figure. He's not a perfect man. He's very flawed, and he's a reluctant hero. He wasn't born brave like Captain America, and he's not a Norse god. He's just a guy and got sort of swept up in this and sort of found his bravery and his courage, and I think Paul has such a relatable, down to earth, honest quality that I think it'll be really compelling, a compelling addition to the whole universe. But certainly as a centerpiece of this movie.
I think Paul Rudd has that everyday man feel to him. And then there's, of course, the themes that run through the film of father-daughter issues that are really prevalent in the storytelling. And I just don't know if there's anyone in the world who could say I'm completely above father-daughter issues. I mean, there's just always stuff to be mined there because the relationship between a parent and a child is so complex. And so I think that there's a lot of wonderful, relatable material there with those storylines. Corey's character is created a lot of room for dimension in all of the different relationships because, of course, Michael Douglas is playing my father, and that's a very cut and dry relationship. It's messed up. We have a very difficult relationship. My relationship, or Hope's relationship with Scott Lang, is that there's animosity there also. She doesn't dig him. She thinks he's useless and wishes he wasn't around. That's very cut and dry. But then Corey's character comes into the fore, and Darren Cross is a complicated man with complicated emotional issues who is being essentially double-crossed by my character. But my character has known him and cared for him for so many years that the question always remains, but is she double-crossing him, or is she actually on his side, or does she really care about him? And what is that relationship with him and Hank, with Darren and Hank? Is there any kind of fatherly love towards Darren, or is it just this, stupid kid took my company and he's screwing around with my science? And so it adds a lot of dimension and a lot of color. And of course, Corey is such a consummate and incredible actor that he manages to bring all of those layers to every performance that he gives. She thinks that Hank's wasting his time with him, and she actually thinks that he's detrimental to their mission. I think Hope is pretty convinced that there's nobody who would be better to complete this mission in the suit than her, in the Ant-Man suit. And we had all these jokes that, Paul would try and slip into the script here and there of things like, yeah, but it's Ant-Man and you're a woman, it doesn't work. And, we would joke around about how she couldn't be Ant-Man. But in Hope's mind, she totally could have been Ant-Man, and she would have really liked to have been Ant-Man, and then Scott got in the way. Darren and I have a particularly complex relationship. They were the hardest scenes to play because I was playing so many layers of, he's sort of going off the deep end. He's losing his mind a little bit. And this man that she's known and is essentially admired for many years because he's so intelligent and good at his job, suddenly is becoming a crazy person. And she's trying to not show him that she thinks he's lost his mind and that he's going crazy and that she's lost faith in him. So she's always keeping a good, brave face. Well, she's an island unto herself. She has her own sense of right and wrong, her own sense of justice, and she wants justice to be served, and she wants, essentially, she doesn't want to see the earth implode or human society fall into chaos. And she realizes that she has literally helped Darren Cross bring the world to the brink of that. And so she feels her only act of her only thing that she can do is to go to her father and to ask for his help. But she does it very much begrudgingly and against her will, and she just wishes she didn't have to be working with her father. She certainly wishes she wasn't working with Scott. And I think in a weird way, her allegiance through a lot of the film is with Darren Cross, but she just feels she has to do what's right, regardless. I think that what people are going to be the most excited about is the ant stuff. And I think what people will take from it is a new respect, understanding, and adoration for ants. And I think, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they'll be clamoring for another Ant-Man movie.
It was a little nerve-wracking, to be honest with you, in the beginning because, these are great storylines that connect in the Marvel universe. They've created their own universe so that it's like being asked to join a club, but a club that's really awesome. So, and he felt really comfortable with it because he was co-writing it with Adam McKay and a couple of other writers, and so he was comfortable with the material, where they can go, where they can play. I didn't quite know the rules yet, So, I was just like, okay, just try to do as best as you can. I play this guy Luis, and he's his best friend. You know what I mean, from jail, and Scotty's best friend from jail, and like they both got in different ways. You know what I mean. I was kind of like a street kid, like a street criminal. He was more of a white-collar criminal, and so we're cellmates, and we become buddies. I think that I kind of protect him, you know what I mean, a little bit in jail, and he teaches me, like, all the other things that I would have never been privy to had it not been for him. He's got a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, and he's really, really quick, and it would, if I had any idea, he'd be like, oh my God, it would be funny? And I'm like, and then he'd give you like 5 examples just on that one idea, which was, I couldn't even, I'm not that fast. Well, I mean, Paul is just killing it as Ant-Man, and he's, of course, he's like like the character's just really likable, and I think that they're gonna feel for the guy and want him to succeed,
I think for me, man, it is a fine moment just to be able to, work alongside such, I mean, proven legends, in the comic book and now the movie world. And I mean, I was eager, excited, just to be a part of it. And Ant-Man is a film that I'd been tracking for quite some time. I just, it's wonderful for it to all come full circle, though. I play Dave, and Dave is in the four-man crew that Scott has, I guess, reluctantly put together. And we all have, I guess, a common meeting place where we all met in prison. Yeah. But trying to get our lives straightened out and on the right path. It's wonderful to have some guys that you can feed off of and you can toss spontaneous improvisations back and forth to. And I mean, I think that is probably one of the more exciting parts about coming to set, because, you have the script and, yeah, okay, we'll just do away with that. let's just do it how we feel it today. I think that's a real key piece of getting reality on screen. I mean, Peyton is I think he incredibly talented, skilled, and I mean he's extremely patient, but not slow. You know what I mean? He has a very, very calm spirit about himself, and I think he properly motivates the cast as well as gets the message across as of what he's looking for out of a scene, what he's trying to pull out of a scene, what he needs from your performance. Yeah, I think all of those things definitely contribute to Peyton's success as the director of Ant-Man.
Got the call from my manager and agent. They called at the same time. When they call at the same time, that's usually either really good news or really bad news. And it was really good news. And they said, you're going to be in Marvel's Ant-Man. In fact, I think the language that was used was welcome to the Marvel Universe. And I was so excited. I called my wife immediately, and I was jumping up and down on the bed in the hotel. And I'm pretty tall. I hit my head on the ceiling in this hotel room. And it was great. Big fan. First comic that I really got into was when I was in like third grade. I would every month get the West Coast Avengers, which was my intro to comic book reading. And interestingly, Hank Pym was a member of that team for a good period of time. So I knew a bit about this character, and then eventually over the years, my comic book collecting and game playing obsession became pretty ridiculous. So I feel very vindicated in my adult life now that I'm getting to be in this movie and part of this universe, and all the naysayers from my childhood who said I was throwing my money and time away. Ha! I say to them, ha! That's what I say. In Ant-Man, I am playing Kurt. And Kurt is a very, very talented with the computer hacking. So he's a computer hacker. He is been in the United States for some time and gotten into a little bit of trouble. Has spent some time in prison, at which point he became friends with Luis. Now he's out, and he is trying to get his life together, and he's trying to do something positive with his skills. And unfortunately, just not having a lot of luck with the job market. And so I'm there with Scott at the beginning of his journey as he's discovering this new, exciting gift power, suit that he has, and it's a blast, man. Working with Michael Douglas was a dream come true for me as an actor. I've been a fan of his for so long. It was incredibly intimidating. And in the end, it was definitely a highlight of this experience for me, because I just know a lot about like his history and like his experiences. So you got to kind of feel people out and gauge how they're going to react. But he's a really easygoing and approachable guy. So I had a lot of questions, and I was able to talk to him a lot and ask him about, oh God, the stuff he did throughout his entire career. And then when we're doing scenes together, you know, he's amazing. Like, he's just so subtle and funny. The first time I saw Paul in the Ant-Man suit, he walked into the room and I was just like, oh my God, that's so cool. Because to see something in real life, like you watch movies and I'm always fascinated with like the magic of movies and how people make things happen that they do. But the people on this who work at Marvel and like the team behind the construction and the production design, the art design of this, like this suit is so intricate and the detail is so cool. So the kid in me that's like the comic book geek is like, oh my God, dude, you look like a real superhero. That's like amazing. And then the person that is a grown up now, kind of working on film sets, is also fascinated. Like, how do they make that do that thing? It was pretty awesome. I love stories like this where this individual who has a very good heart and he has a really good intention has just not been able to use his gifts and his skills for creating the kind of life that he deserves and that he could have, his potential. And so over the course of this film, it's exciting because you get to watch this really wonderful guy with a good heart discover how his abilities can do really good things, and that's at the heart of all good heroes' journeys. You know, I think that's why we love superheroes.
I've never like followed comic books or superheroes. I was more of a Barbie girl growing up, but I really was excited about Guardians of the Galaxy, and so when I found out Peyton was directing and Paul was starring, I was thinking it was going to be sort of on that level, which I was excited about because I did see Guardians in the theater, and I thought it was so funny and such a great take on a superhero movie, because it had great action and it was really suspenseful, but still there was so much comedy in the script, which I knew Paul Rudd would bring to it, and I knew that Peyton would. So that made me very excited. I play his ex-wife, and we have a child together, Cassie. And in the beginning of the movie, he comes around to visit his daughter, of course, and he hasn't really gotten a job or hasn't paid child support, and he, has been in jail. So I kind of give him an ultimatum, like, if you don't get your stuff together, if you don't get your life together, then you can't see your daughter. So I think he, kind of that's the impetus for him. Paul's awesome. He's really fun. He's really funny. He has a ton of energy. I mean, just as an actor, he's super professional. Bobby's awesome. This was the first time I've gotten to work with him and Paul, and they're very close friends in real life, so it's been fun to witness them. I honestly don't think I've laughed so hard on a set in so long. And sometimes at my own expense, but that's fine. I think, my relationship with Bobby's character is good. I think, my character is Maggie. Maggie's looked for someone who's stable and who's going to take care of her and her daughter and help her take care of her daughter. And I think that, they seem really connected and they seem good. It never felt when I read the script, and it doesn't feel in the scenes that Bobby's character is like a runner-up for Paul's character. Like, I feel like Maggie really truly has moved on, and at least that's the choice I made, and I like that would be the case, because I think it makes for a stronger character for me to play. He seems to be really open to us making adjustments in the scenes that will better serve the characters, which, it's his job to sort of keep an eye on the story, make sure we're telling the story, but it's fun to have him, especially like a Marvel movie of this size, to still feel like we're able to take apart a scene and put it back together and make sure it works for our characters and our storylines and our journey. I feel like Ant-Man, our version of Ant-Man, is a redemption story. I think, I mean, I know the audiences are going to laugh, and I know they're going to love the special effects, and they're going to love the stunts, but I think at the bottom of it all is a story about a guy who straightens up and uses his powers for good, not evil. And I think that's kind of way cooler than just starting out with someone trying to save the day.
So when the chance to do Ant-Man came around, I jumped at the chance. Ant-Man was something that, you know, I'd come in with Marvel, and I'd known Kevin Feige from the time I was developing Fantastic Four. I'd also come in and pitched on Guardians of the Galaxy several years ago, and so I was on their radar. So when Ant-Man came about, I got the call, and I came in and met with Kevin, and you know, read the scripts and saw the materials, and I came sort of armed with my own attitude about Ant-Man. I knew the character inside and out, the Hank Pym version, the Scott Lang version, and you know, I definitely had feelings about those characters. I think when you grow up a comic book kid, you have your own personal relationship with those characters, and in the movie version, I had clear ideas about what I wanted to see, what I didn't want to see, and sort of how I would approach that character. So I think that was helpful. So in the movie version, I wanted to kind of bring out a Hank Pym that really had some gray areas. He's the mentor character in the movie, but he's kind of a screwed up mentor. And particularly because we had Michael Douglas playing Pym. And Michael, who is a movie star in the most literal sense of the word. I mean, he is just, he's it, man. I'm a huge Douglas fan. And he's made a career out of playing these characters who are really complicated and kind of morally ambiguous. So I really wanted to sort of to tap into that. And the Hank Pym in the movie, you know, he is, again, he's a character who is like motivated by guilt. He's got definite issues with his daughter. He's got really ambivalent feelings about this thing that he's created, the Pym particle and the Ant-Man suit. So it's interesting to have kind of a mentor-pupil story where the mentor himself, he has some really mixed feelings about what he's doing. That's an interesting character, and I think a unique character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because A, he's a father, and really his arc in the movie is all about, he's a pretty normal guy who's made terrible decisions in his life, and in the beginning of the movie we see him coming out of prison. And his biggest goal, his #1 goal, is to be a part of his daughter's life. And that's a really different arc for a character in the Marvel Universe, and one that I found really interesting. I also like that Scott Lang is a hero who doesn't have any superpowers at all. It's all about the suit. And particularly with Paul Rudd playing Scott Lang, we have a lot of fun with the idea of like, what would you do if you found the suit? What would I do? Well, that's kind of probably what Paul Rudd is going to do, or what his attitude about it would be. So he's really the eyes and ears of the audience in this adventure. And it kind of, the movie I think is also different than other Marvel movies in that, like, as I said, he's a normal guy, and through a set of circumstances, he comes into contact with this suit and gets sort of pulled into a Marvel world, you know? There's a world out there he had no idea existed, and things going on he had no idea about, and now he is sucked right into the middle of that and becomes a central part in trying to sort of, help Hank Pym out with this massive issue that he has. Scott Lang in the movie, you know, he's a very smart guy. He's got a master's in electrical engineering. He's got definite skills as a cat burglar. You know, he at a certain point in his life made some bad decisions and has paid for them. He's done a 3-year stint in prison. And as we see him at the beginning of the movie, he's getting out and he's determined to make a new life for himself. He's just going to go on the straight and the up and up and have a relationship with his daughter and be a good guy. But it's a tough world out there, you know, and there are these temptations that come at him. And so part of it is this battle for his sort of moral compass. It's a story of a guy, and you're watching him go through life and sort of get back out in the real world, and you're rooting for him to make the right decisions. And part of the movie really is about him getting in touch with his better self. Well, I think it's important when you start any movie that everyone on board, behind the camera and in front of the camera, have a clear sense of what the tone of the movie is. And a movie like Ant-Man, it's tricky because there are a lot of things going on. I mean, it's definitely a superhero movie. It's got a strong science fiction concept, with the shrinking and controlling ants. It's got the structure of a heist movie. It's got these dual sort of father-daughter redemption stories going on. But really, tonally, the thing that's holding it all together is it really has the beat of a comedy. Like the movements and sort of the tone of it, it's comedic. We're not laughing at Ant-Man, but we're definitely acknowledging the absurdity of, this character and his powers and being able to shrink. And it's something that you can have a very clear idea of what the tone is, but you got to be able to communicate that tone to everybody involved. Paul Rudd is like an insurance policy. He's like a really charismatic insurance policy. And by that I mean, if I'd come into Ant-Man without Paul Rudd in that role, it would have been a little tricky because Ant-Man tonally is a very specific thing. It's different than any other movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And part of that is the hero himself. It's people usually aren't familiar. The average person is not necessarily familiar with Ant-Man in the comics, so there are these questions of what does he do? What's the tone of the movie? And I think Paul sort of clarifies that a lot. And one of the great things about Paul is he's mostly known now for his comedic roles, and people forget what an incredible dramatic actor he is. So for me, it was important at the beginning of the movie when we see Paul in prison before he gets out to present sort of a more rugged looking Paul Rudd. And Paul got in amazing shape for the movie, and we present him as this guy who can, at least for a little while, hold his own, in a prison fight. But we also like the idea, of Indiana Jones, like a guy who, gets pummeled but comes back for more. He's a very scrappy character. But Paul just, he is my favorite kind of actor. He's smart. He comes incredibly prepared, but the preparation also means that he's willing to throw all of that out and come up with something absolutely new. Also, the fact that Paul's one of the writers on the movie was great because he was not only concerned with the character of Scott Lang and about how many lines do I have, whatever. No, I should say this, not you. He's not that guy at all. He gets the story, the larger story, the arc of all the characters and the tone of the whole thing. So that was incredibly valuable.
It was a really easy decision, but really mostly it was an easy decision to make because of Paul, really. And it was funny because I had just seen Guardians of the Galaxy with my son, and I was so impressed with it, and I was so impressed with how funny it was, and at the same time still had all the elements of the great characters in the Marvel universe, but it had this sort of weird little edge to it that I really enjoyed, and I just thought, well, with Paul playing the role, they're probably going to go in that direction as well because Paul's as funny as they get, and so I'm really proud to be part of it. I was really psyched to be in a movie that wasn't, in a superhero movie that wasn't just about flying and lifting things, and I think the idea of what they can do with the special effects with this character is really just kind of a really exciting thing, and of course Michael Douglas playing the original Dr. Pym is just brilliant, and it's just a great cast. And I think anytime you get offered a movie, you look at all those elements, you look at what the story is, of course, and who's involved, and when you see people like Michael Douglas and Paul Rudd get involved, Evangeline, Corey Stoll, who I'm a big fan of back in New York, it was pretty easy to just throw my hat in the ring and say, yeah, I want to be in this. Yeah, so I play Jim Paxton, and he's a police officer with the San Francisco Police Department and he is about to get married to Scott Lang's ex-wife, Paul Rudd's character's ex-wife. And of course, Scott Lang and Maggie, his ex-wife, have a little girl, Cassie. And so my character's about to get married, and he's sort of formed this great little home. And he's devoted to both Cassie and Maggie, and is pretty intent on keeping that home safe and really a safe place for the girls. And when we pick up the story here, Scott's just gotten out of jail, where he's sort of been in and out of jail, and he shows back up. And it's important to Paxton that he sort of keep whatever nonsense he's involved with away from this family that he's trying to solidify. I was always looking forward to working with Judy Greer, and seriously, she's a very funny woman, and you know, she's just one of those actresses that, you know, can take something that seems sort of very basic on the page and turn it into something really just quirky and unlike anything else that you would have expected to have seen when you read the scene. She's really talented and really just a creative actress, and so that's always fun to be able to get to work with. Peyton really is a great captain of the ship. You know, he's a lot of fun, and you know, he has some great ideas, and he's really just open to us really having fun with it and really playing with it, and he's got a great sense of humor.
A lot of heroes have inhabited the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it really felt like it was time to find a way to do something different, to see an action scene in a totally different perspective, from a totally different point of view. And of course, that's why you make Ant-Man now, because Ant-Man shrinks, because through the power of the Pym particles that Michael Douglas's character Hank Pym invented, he is able to shrink down to a... And suddenly, any location, the inside of a briefcase, the inside of the playset in a little girl's bedroom, becomes an epic setting for an action battle, unlike any action movie we've ever made before, ever seen before. And what's exciting is there hasn't been a film in which characters shrink for many years. So the last time audiences have seen something like this, technology was very different. What we can do today is almost anything that we can imagine. Well, you know, one of the things that's so fun about working on Marvel films is you get to adapt the costumes from the comic books. And we've been doing it for many years now. And if you look at the way Iron Man looked in the early comics versus what he looks like now in the movies, or even the Hulk or Captain America or the details of his shield, we always want to take and respect the iconography from the comics because they're great, because the artistry that led to the creation of those comics is magnificent. But we need to always alter them a little bit to bring them into the real world, to bring them into the modern day. And with Ant-Man, we had a slightly different challenge, which was within our story, the Ant-Man suit is older. The Ant-Man suit is has a bit of a retro design to it, because as we learn over the course of our story, Scott Lang, our Paul Rudd character, steals this suit from the Michael Douglas character Hank Pym, and this was a suit that Hank Pym used for decades. Years ago, he used this suit in the 60s and 70s up to the 80s. So and then he put it away. He hid it away for many years. So it's an older version of this costume, and that was fun too, to be able to do things that looked incredibly heroic, that felt exactly like it was inspired from the pages of the comics, but at the same time fit into that story, and you believed that Michael Douglas was wearing this many years ago. You know, when we cast any of our heroes, the bar is very high now. There are so many amazing actors playing our characters now that whenever a new one comes into the universe, they have to be great. And they have to be great not only leading their own films and carrying their own stories, but also interacting one day with our other actors. So it really is a high bar now whenever we cast people. And to be honest, there was only one choice that we had for Scott Lang, for somebody who could play this petty criminal, who could have the intelligence in committing these crimes that you would understand why Hank Pym would want to recruit him for the heist that he's going to pull, and at the same time stay very likable and be somebody who you root for the whole time. You want him to get back together with his daughter. You want him to be able to redeem himself because he seems like a good guy at heart, even though he has these skills that are best served when he's breaking into places. And Paul Rudd has all of those things. He's got the square jaw. He's got the heroics. We knew he would pull off that suit. And he's got humor, of course, which plays into all of our films, particularly Ant-Man. And he just seems like a good guy behind those eyes, and that you're going to root for him the whole time. So we were very, very lucky when we sent him the script and we talked about the role, and he absolutely wanted to do it right away. And he's awesome. Well, we wanted to, with the role of Hank Pym, it's a role, he's an older man in our film, but he's somebody who had these adventures in the past. And we wanted somebody, we kept saying, let's cast somebody who is an older man, but who you really believe and knew could have done these adventures in the past. And we used to say, if we were making this movie in the 1970s, the 1980s, who would we have cast? We want to believe that this person was Ant-Man in the past, and yet today is a stoic, aging, heroic figure in his own right who can be the mentor to our new hero. And when Michael Douglas's name came up, we were like, this is perfect. This is perfect because he would have been kick-ass Ant-Man back in the day, and he could still kick ass today. And yet Michael is willing to play a role, and even play a little older than he really is, because he's this dashing, unbelievable movie star still in real life, and we aged him up a bit for it. And knowing that he also has those heroics, has that noble sense about him. The backstory of Hank, where he really sort of put his life aside to protect the world from his own invention, and at the same time has a great sense of humor, because there are sequences in this film where he needs to train Scott Lang, who has essentially no business trying to become a superhero, and Hank Pym has to train him to be able to shrink and grow super fast, to be able to handle his own against the ants, which when you're looking up at a giant ant, it's a whole other experience than when you look down and see them crawling through the sidewalks. And Michael Douglas more than delivered. And he's just got such this iconic presence about him, and his voice, and his entire aura is very, very impressive. Everybody involved with making this movie knows more about ants now than they ever dreamed possible. And that was because there was just a tremendous amount of research done, because ants are amazing. Frankly, we could make 12 more of these films and still not actually explore everything that ants can do in real life. So there are 4 or 5 species of ants that we introduce in this movie, and that we see Scott and Ant-Man interact with. And it's incredible what ants can do. They're really impressive. Peyton Reed, our director, has done a tremendous amount bringing this movie out into the world. Peyton is somebody that I've known for almost 12 years, I think. We almost did a movie together a while ago. He was one of our top choices to do our last new original film, Guardians of the Galaxy. So when he agreed to take on Ant-Man, it was sort of a dream come true for us, because we'd come so close so many times. And he understood this character from the start. He understood this world. And what excited him is, you'll never find a bigger fanboy than Peyton Reed.